Two of the men who perform acts of journalism on a routine basis that I've been following for years are Jerry Dunleavy and James Hasson. And I have the fortune today of having them both in studio with me. Jerry is a former Washington Examiner investigative reporter. He now works, importantly, in Congress, but he's one of the good men who's in Congress. And James Hasson is a former Army captain, graduate of U.S. Army Ranger School, an Afghanistan veteran, and that's important for today's topic, too. Gentlemen, great to have you both here.
Thanks for having us, Vince.
Great to be here, Vince.
Yes, great to see and talk to you both in person. The reason the two of you are together is because you have a new book. It's called Kabul, the Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco in the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. We recently heard from some of these Gold Star families who, why did it take so long to have their stories told publicly? I think Daryl Issa and company were out doing a field hearing in California, in Southern California, where these families live, chatting with them, and it was just jaw-dropping. It really was jaw-dropping, the extent to which these families feel betrayed and abandoned by the Biden administration and are still trying to pick up the pieces. Jerry, talk a little bit about, what the point of this book is, what you discovered, and what questions are still unanswered.
Well, I think that the families are justified in how they feel. This feeling of betrayal that they have from the Biden administration and the lack of accountability for the Afghanistan withdrawal and the disaster that it was generally, but also specifically the lack of accountability for the attack by ISIS-K that happened that killed their family members. And, we actually, in the course of writing this book, we had the pleasure and the honor of talking to a lot of the Gold Star families. And so their stories are included in our book, and our book is actually dedicated to the 13 service members that lost their lives, and to all of the Americans who lost their lives in Afghanistan. And just the attack itself,
yes,
as we point out in the book, did not have to happen. And
at the Abbey Gate,
the Abbey Gate attack did not have to happen. And,
yep.
and we can go into it further, but one key point to keep in mind is the U.S. abandonment of Bagram Air Base was idiotic in so many different reasons. It would have been a much safer and smarter place to run an evacuation out of. Potentially, if the U.S. had kept its air assets there, we could have stopped the Taliban from taking Kabul.
Right.
But most importantly, the terrorist who carried out that attack at Abbey Gate, his name's Abdul Rahman al-Aghari, and the Biden administration won't even say his name or admit his name, but he was in prison at Bagram when we abandoned it. The only reason that he was running free and the only reason that he was able to carry out that attack is because we abandoned Bagram, the Taliban took Bagram, and the first thing that the Taliban did when they took Bagram is they freed thousands of ISIS-K prisoners, including that bomber. If we had just kept Bagram Air Base, that bomber would have been sitting behind bars instead of being out there threatening and killing Americans.
It's such an important and haunting rundown, Jerry. James, were you stunned by finding out that detail that Bagram really was, and we've known for a while Bagram was the most important asset to hold on to if you're going to leave the country for obvious reasons. You don't have to be Sun Tzu to know that. But the fact that they were releasing terrorists from Bagram that ended up killing American service members, that must have been jaw-dropping.
Yeah, it absolutely was. When we started writing Kabul, Jerry and I thought that we knew a lot about this story. And by the time we finished, we realized that we hadn't even known a third of it. So that there's that aspect to the fact that the bomber came directly from Bagram, which we abandoned only for political reasons, because Joe Biden wanted under 1,000 troops. He wanted to be able to say there were under 1,000 troops left in Afghanistan. You can't hold Bagram with under 1,000 troops. So that's one aspect. But there were two other things that we also uncovered while we were reading through the witness interviews and sworn statements that came with that were accompanied the Pentagon's Abbey Gate report. And we came across one from an officer who was senior enough, his name's redacted, but it was senior enough that he was briefing all of the different foreign embassies about the intelligence about the attack. So someone who's very much in the know. And what he told investigators was that they had tracked ISIS-K to a hotel 2 to 3 kilometers west of Hamid Karzai International Airport, and that military leaders, because we were relying on the Taliban for our security, asked the Taliban to raid that location. And of course, they didn't. And secondly, there was a few sworn statements from Army intelligence officers who talked about the fact that there was a targeting package for an airstrike because the U.S. had identified an ISIS-K location in the days leading up to the attack when they were on the move and facilitating what ended up being the attack. And they asked for a permission that had to go through U.S. forces Afghanistan to the CENTCOM commander for permission to conduct that strike. And military leaders determined that it was, quote, infeasible due to negative reaction from the Taliban. So all of this is brand new, and it's shocking to say the least.
Yeah, and all of these, I mean, the insane considerations that were given throughout all of this in the wake of the attack. In we know now, to give the appearance of action, they blew up a guy who was not a terrorist. They ended up just striking civilians. Am I right? This is and killing a bunch of people for no reason. And then they ended up admitting later, oh, it was bad intel. The guy was putting water in his truck or something.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reason why that botched airstrike happened was because the Abbey Gate bombing happened, and the U.S. felt intense pressure to stop another attack, and I do think politically, President Biden probably felt the political necessity.
They wanted to demonstrate competence. They wanted to make it seem like they knew what they were doing.
And the problem with that is that the U.S., from our assessment, including what we found in the Pentagon documents, the abandonment of Bagram and the prisoner being released, and then the testimony from Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, who testified that he had who he believed to be the bomber in his sights, but wasn't given permission from his commanding officer to take that shot.
Yep.
All of that combined shows that we think that the U.S. probably could have done more to stop the attack, and that the ultimate problem here is that President Biden put us in a position where we were relying on the Taliban for security, and that's just an impossible position to put yourself in.
Jerry Dunleavy, thanks for that rundown. And again, I'm with both Jerry Dunleavy and James Hasson, the authors of an important new book called Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought to the End. I want to play that audio. This is Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews testifying that he believes that he did have the bomber in his sights before the bombing.
I requested engagement authority while my team leader was ready on the M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The response, leadership did not have the engagement authority for us. Do not engage. I requested for the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whited, to come to the tower to see what we did. While we waited for him, psychological operations individuals came to our tower immediately and confirmed the suspect met the suicide bomber description. He eventually arrived and we showed him our evidence, the photos we had of the two men. We reassured him of the ease of fire on the suicide bomber. Pointedly, we asked him for engagement authority and permission. We asked him if we could shoot. Our battalion commander said, and I quote, "I don't know," end quote. Myself and my team leader asked very harshly, well, who does? Because this is your responsibility, sir. He again replied he did not know, but would find out. We received no update and never got our answer. Eventually, the individual disappeared. To this day, we believe he was a suicide bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored.
So when you hear a story like that, James Hasson, as a veteran, how frustrating is it to hear those details laid out?
It's immensely frustrating, and it's more than that. It's angering because those Marines and the other soldiers who were alongside them and the airmen who were there as well put everything on the line. They knew that they were a great personal danger, and as we detail at length in Kabul, they dealt with excruciating things. And, as their chaplain told them before they went to the gates for the first time, you're going to see things that no human being should have to see. And they did. And so they did everything right, and they performed heroically. And they were failed from the top down. And to this day, there's been no accountability.
There's been one. Stu Scheller, Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, who spoke out publicly, criticized the administration's ineptness. He is no longer serving because he was forced out.
That's correct. And Secretary Austin is still in his position. Secretary Blinken is still in his position despite ignoring all warnings to the contrary.
Yep.
General Milley's still in his position, even though he, carried the party line. And it's despicable.
There's another military veteran involved here. John Kirby is a spokesman for the White House. He's a Navy admiral, a career as a public affairs officer, Navy admiral.
Yes.
And he has been bragging relentlessly since the Afghanistan withdrawal about how efficient and well executed it was. Here is an example of that.
Nations like China and Russia took a look at what we did in Afghanistan, and we've talked about this many, many times over the last year, and had to marvel at the speed, the efficiency, the effectiveness that a very small number of troops. Brian, you listen to me now, hear me out. A small number of troops were able to move that many Afghans safely out of that country. No other nation in the world can do that.
As they're falling from the plane wings and dying. So Jerry Dunleavy, you guys talked about, you spoke to the Gold Star families. You've talked to endless people to put this book together to give an accurate portrayal of what really happened. Does that square with John Kirby's saying that it was speed, efficiency, and effectiveness?
Well, no. And, John Kirby gave another interview very recently, right around the second anniversary, where he said that the CENTCOM investigation into the Abbey Gate attack determined that it wasn't preventable. Well, an interesting thing to note about the CENTCOM investigation is that they never interviewed Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews. So to still to this day to be leaning on that investigation to say that this was not preventable doesn't take into account what we now know. And to Kirby's other point about Russia and China marveling, look, the American service members on the ground did perform heroically, but Russia and China, we have 2 chapters in our book about how Russia and China took advantage of this situation. It's clear to us, and we lay this out, that Vladimir Putin had wanted to invade Ukraine for a long time. The chaos and the debacle in Afghanistan, the way that NATO and the United States looked like they were in a shambles, we believe, and we make a very strong case for it, that was very likely the final push that Putin needed to invade Ukraine. And when it comes to China...
Why? Well, let me pause on that point.
Yeah.
Save China for a moment.
Yeah.
But so Putin is watching as an administration. There's a lot of bipartisan support for getting out of Afghanistan, but the way that it actually went down was an amazing display of ineptness, an amazing display. And so what Putin's probably seeing, if I'm reading you correctly, and what your assessment is here, is that they don't know what they're doing at all. They don't even know how to execute this withdrawal. They can barely explain it to their own people. These people are so incompetent. Now's the time.
Now's the time. He's wanted to do it for a long time. He's been looking for his opportunity, and this was what he saw as his best chance to do it when the U.S. and NATO were reeling.
It's just amazing. Okay, stay with me if you would. We'll take a quick traffic break. The book is Kabul, the untold story of Biden's fiasco and the American warriors who fought to the end. Jerry Dunleavy and James Hasson here with me in studio. James, I just played audio a moment ago of White House spokesman John Kirby bragging about the efficiency of the Afghanistan withdrawal, saying, things went great. And you wanted to make a point on that subject.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you played that clip from Kirby using that talking point, because one thing that we point out in Kabul, or that we reveal in Kabul, is that the administration started getting under immense pressure beginning on August 17th and 18th about the slow pace of evacuations. And to counter that, they basically lifted all restrictions for entry to the airfield for about 36 hours until they became completely flooded, but anybody could get in. So at that point, there were tens of thousands of people on the airfield, almost none of whom were American citizens or the Afghan allies we were supposed to get out. They had to shut down the gates for 2 days to be able to process all these people.
It's insane.
And get them out. There were riots on the airfield because of all the people inside the airfield, and with no ability to control them. And ultimately, military officers said that is what led to the immense pressure that the military received from the Biden administration, from D.C., to keep the gates open on August 26th when the attack ultimately occurred, because there were still so many people that hadn't been rescued.
We don't even let American citizens to their airport gate without going through TSA. How is it that we're letting foreign nationals through by the thousands without any meaningful security check, without screening for the people we actually need to get out of the country? And this is the kind of thing, what's so frustrating about all this is it wasn't like it was a surprise we were leaving. This is the kind of thing you plan in advance. You're like, we're leaving. This is how we're doing it. And this horse crap about, well, we had to stick to the timetable with the Taliban. Screw them. We stick to our own timetable. Whatever that timetable is. We've got the guns. We've got the capability. Let's do that. We'll leave on our own terms. But, we got something very different. Jerry Dunleavy, you mentioned a moment ago that there were signals that were sent in this event, this horrific event, to places like Russia and China. We talked Russia. Talk about China. What lessons did China take from the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan?
So China clearly saw the writing on the wall in the summer of 2021 as well, because they really started to sidle up to the Taliban. They knew who was going to end up on top, even if apparently the Biden administration didn't. But when Kabul fell and the Taliban took over, China labeled this the Kabul moment. This is Chinese propaganda, their government propaganda, their state media, the Kabul moment. And they use this as propaganda against Taiwan, essentially saying, look, this is what the U.S. did in Afghanistan. They're leaving their Afghan allies behind. And this is what awaits you if you're going to try to rely on the United States to come to your rescue when we invade. So don't bother. We're coming for you, and you can't count on the U.S. And, we have an entire chapter called the CCP and the Kabul moment. And I was wondering when we published the book, how long is China going to continue to use this messaging? And lo and behold, we're in the second anniversary, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry on August 15th comes out and is talking about the Kabul moment again.
Yeah. Last question for you guys. James, you talk to these Gold Star families. We are now, by my count, 5 days away. August 26th of 2021 was the day of the bombing at the Abbey Gate. You talk to these Gold Star families. How are they going to mark that date this year?
With a whole tremendous amount of sadness and anger, as is appropriate. And I'll kick that to Jerry a little bit, because he's developed some very strong relationships with those families throughout the book. But what I will say is that as we lay out, as they suspected, and we lay out in Kabul, this did not need to happen, and it falls completely at the feet of the Biden administration. So I'll kick it to Jerry.
I can't imagine what these families are dealing with.
Well, a lot of the families on the 26th are going to be holding their own private events, whether they're community events, private events. And August 29th, they're going to be coming to Washington, D.C. to testify on Capitol Hill in a roundtable for the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Okay, good. We look forward to that. I know you're working to help the congressional investigation as well. A lot more answers to come, but many of them found within this book. Kabul, the untold story of Biden's fiasco and the American warriors who fought to the end. Gentlemen, great to have you.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, Vince.
Appreciate it.